Okay, hi everybody. I'm going to be talking about risk and innovation, and in particular, I chose this as the disruptive topic because it's something I care about. I care about creating and being part of environments where, first of all, I know that risk is required in order to innovate. I also know that environments have to be just so in order for people to feel comfortable taking risks. So I studied this and I explored and researched and came up with what I've come up with here. And I do think the other thing I want to share is something Chris mentioned in the keynote, which is that soft skills are the future. I think that is absolutely true for us knowledge workers and performers, and I think people in L&D already are getting looked to as being thought leaders around innovation. It already happens. People look to me like that I'm the company kind of design guru, you know, about all the stuff I'm about to talk about. And that's why I've gotten better at it, because people keep looking to me for it. So it's like, dang, I guess I better be prepared to be this kind of person. So I think it's going to happen for all of us. I think it has to do with what he was talking about, which is that learning and the future and everything is now kind of part of I don't know, our jobs are changing and the roles we play in organizations are changing. So that said, I barely got through last time, so I'm going to go kind of fast. Would somebody be willing to read this quote?
Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far it is possible to go.
Right. Sort of no duh, but it's also easier said than done. But the truth is, only if you're willing to push it and try something that's scary, that might get rejected, that might get spit on and made fun of, only if you're willing to do that will you find out, right? That said, I'm sure you've all worked in environments where probably what you most remember is environments where the risk was, where it was not safe enough. You probably really remember that, where it wasn't cool to make mistakes. You just knew it, so you just didn't. You've probably also worked in, and maybe don't recall as easily, settings where the risk was actually too low, where it was super safe. It's called a rut, by the way. Where it was super safe and super comfortable and nothing really happens in those environments either. So the interesting thing about this topic is we're talking about disruption, but the truth is whether you are a leader because you're leading teams, or whether you're a leader because you're in L&D and they're looking at us like leaders about this now, you have to not disrupt the Goldilocks principle here, which is there is a just right space in the danger versus safety zone for teams to have. And what I'm going to share with you are 8 tips to help either, if you're managing teams, then you as a leader have great influence, but even if you are not managing teams, you as an individual contributor have an opportunity to influence your environment with these 8 things. Number 1, this is a little picture. I don't think this is exact, but it says something like, why does it take so much to pump us up and only one Coke to bring us down? Okay, so we all can relate, yes. Well, this is not just how we feel. There's some science here. There's some studies done in 2014 with high-performing teams and less high-performing teams. And coincidentally, there were studies, a different study done among married couples, and those who were more likely to survive without divorce and those who were less likely to survive without divorce, related to the praise versus criticism ratio. And the truth is, they did find a number. There's a ratio, and I'm about to share with you what it is. This is a little graphic about the high-performing teams versus the low-performing teams, and they measured performance by peer, 360-degree peer feedback, and also profitability, and one other thing that I can't remember. And so the lowest performing teams had a pretty, the actual criticism was a little bit higher than the praise. So, and what's interesting to me about that is we may think, oh yeah, well no duh, because that was a really negative environment. In my experience, it's not that. It's that highly critical environments everyone becomes desensitized to criticism, so it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's not that it turns into a negative environment, it turns into a totally flat, neutral environment, because the criticism has no impact. So moderately performing teams had a little bit more praise to criticism, and the highest performing teams had, you ready for it, here's the number, 5 to 1. So 5 moments of praise for every one bit of thoughtful criticism seemed to produce, and coincidentally was also played out in marriages. That marriages that survive seem to be ones where the couples generally had that 5-to-1 ratio going on. This next thing has to do with performance versus growth cultures, and I'm sorry that you can't read the comics. I wasn't sure what kind of space we were going to have here, but now I wish I had handouts, so I apologize. Although this whole thing is available at the Learnapalooza website, so you can always get it. Anyway, this little comic strip says, hey, we only learn from mistakes, therefore you got to flunk this class in order to learn. Well, that's a little extreme, but what I want to talk about is, anyone know what I mean by performance versus growth cultures? Performance cultures are all the rage. Performance cultures are all numbers, metrics, quotas. Performance-obsessed cultures take any field and turn it into a number that is measured by performance, right? Growth culture is kind of what Microsoft is trying to do. They're trying to, instead of measuring being performance obsessed, they try to measure learning. So you could imagine that in a performance-based or obsessed culture, what's going to happen if you make mistakes? So you will probably cover them up. Or worse, you won't do anything that's going to possibly turn into a mistake. Yeah, they can. But so in performance-obsessed cultures, mistakes go underground and don't happen, and it's not safe to make them. And so you can imagine what. But you can also be growth-obsessed too. And here's this next little comic strip, which is a picture of a little kitty cat who knocks over a wine glass. It says, gee, I wonder what will happen, knocks it over, and then says, I wonder what will happen if I knock this one over too. So a growth-obsessed, without any performance metric kind of involvement, you can get the inertia of consensus building going on and a little bit of constant experimentation and no actual, so it really is, it's the Goldilocks thing. It really is a balance of both. A little bit of both is good. And the important thing is to know what they are and to be kind of aware when one or the other is taking over. This next little tip has to do with diversity. So everyone gets this. And I probably don't have to tell you all, diversity doesn't have to do with how we look. That's how it's in the comic strip. But it's our preferences, our perspectives, our wisdoms, our life experiences. And it can come from people of all ages and shades and whatever, So yes. Diversity is great. And I will also attest to this personally. I don't care how culturally sensitive you are, human beings, if they're not conscientiously paying attention to it, will surround themselves with like human beings. That is what we do. So we may not even mean to do this, and then we all look around like, how did this happen? Well, it's just because that's the way we're wired. So you have to be conscientious about it. That said, also don't fall into this trap. This is a little comic strip, somebody saying, hey, we like to get together a lot of different kind of people and put them in a room together and wait for the magic to happen. Sometimes it takes a while. So this is also saying diversity is not a panacea. It's not like you can just get people together who are largely different and then wait for sparks to start flying. That doesn't happen. 2 pizza rule. Anyone heard the 2 pizza rule and know who it came from? Okay, so there's,
Apple or one of those.
Bezos. It's Jeff Bezos, so it's an Amazon rule. And it's great because I'm sure there's science around this, but his rule of thumb, and I buy this, is that the right size team can finish off 2 pizzas and not be hungry anymore. And if they don't finish the 2 pizzas, it's probably too small. And if they finish it off and there's people that didn't get enough, then the team's probably a little too big. So I love that rule. It's just easy to, I know it's not scientific and, we're trying to go for science, but I have science for you on the next one. So if size of the team matters, the next question I have for you is, does expertise? So for example, and I'll read this comic strip to you because it's funny, but for example, if you were going to innovate something in the medical community, what percentage of people on that team would you want to be doctors? Who should be doctors? You know what, I'm going to skip the comic strip because I'm going to run out of time. But you can catch this later. I have a lot of little funnies in here for you. So what do you think? What percentage? 20. He says 20. Anybody else? 10. 50. You're the closest. 40% is the magic number. But she's still close. Oh, yeah. About 40%. So, but what's mind-blowing a little bit for us is that means that if we're going to try to do something innovative in the L&D space, then we should only be 40% L&D people. And that's not usually the way it goes. Usually we sit around with 100% L&D people. But what happens, and I think this quote says it best, better than I could, so I'm going to read it to you. It came from one of the articles I cite at the end of this. Innovation thrives when expert users make up about 40% of a team. Any less, and the company will lose sight of what its customers need. Any more, and the group will tend to converge on old ideas. So we may not mean to, but we all sit around with our L&D folks trying to innovate something. We're probably converging on old ideas. We need to get some fresh brains in there. Speaking of fresh brains, brainstorming has a little bit of a bad rap. This is a little comic strip of somebody showing up to a brainstorming session with their little plants and a little bloom at the top, and everybody else is there with their shears. Because that's how it feels for a lot of us, and again, this is human nature. I do it even though I facilitate brainstorming sessions and I know how to prevent it when I'm a participant. I do the same thing everybody else does. I start chipping away at ideas. It's just what we all do. So I love this suggestion I read in an article about having a brainstorming where only questions can be asked. Everything has to be in the form of a question. Think Jeopardy. What's great about that is, you know, people who are the big thinkers and always have the ideas and stuff, they'll pose their ideas in the form of a question. But those who are more thoughtful, analytical, like to probe and explore and discuss and stuff, they will suddenly come alive. You know, where they're not the kind of people just to shoot out ideas. They don't do that, but they can shoot out questions like nobody's business. So you can kind of get more people involved and just shake up the whole brainstorming thing. Okay, I'm going to skip this just in the interest of time. I do like all my funnies though, so you can look at them later. This one has to do with trust. The comic strip has Dilbert and his boss sitting together, and his boss says to Dilbert, according to anonymous online employee surveys, you don't trust management. What's up with that? And there's a long silence. And then the boss says, oh, right. Right. Trust is really hard. And there's a great article at the end of this. I encourage you to read it. It highlighted all these things, but the one thing I want to focus on, and I don't have the magic answer for this, I'll be working on it for a lifetime, but it's your authenticity. And the reason I think that this is especially hard is in our highly political environments, we learn from a very young age to be two-faced. We don't mean to be, but we learn to be influential to one party this way and influential to a different party in another way. And then what happens is as people start comparing notes, it chips away at your credibility and your authenticity and your trustworthiness. Like I said, I'll be working on this for a lifetime because being both authentic and also influential is something I don't think you'll ever master. But it really is that. It is being both authentic and influential regardless of who you're talking to. And striving for that, letting that be your North Star. All right, I have one more minute. This last one has to do with wave makers, and the joke here is it says, hey, we haven't had a good idea since, 3 years ago. And somebody else says, yeah, that was when we let the troublemakers go. So it's not so much that troublemakers have good ideas, it's this. Sometimes people, especially management type people, like to think of innovation as idea management. And so what you have here is you have somebody shoveling all these ideas into a machine and then churning out because they think of it as more of a processing thing. But truth is, good ideas anyway, don't usually go through an idea machine. Actually, they come in waves. And they come in waves that are not comfortable, that we're often not prepared for, that knock us off our feet, that we want to prevent if we can. But they carry stuff. They carry stuff. And that's really the main message here is don't be so afraid of waves. You're not going to stop them, so don't try. Instead, look around for the treasures that might be floating in the suds there. There's junk in there too, so sort of like thrift store shopping. You know, sometimes you might get lucky and sometimes not. And thank you all very much. Okay.